And this is a time that you can just kind of an open house or a town hall. So if you have any questions, we do have Steve walking around with a mic. So if you just so people on Zoom can hear us, and if you're on Zoom and have a question, put that in the chat, and our sound crew will let us know that question as well. And I think you have one over here.
Excellent, eager. She's like on it. She's got a question.
Mary's got it.
Back in the day when it was. So as you have a question, if you would just identify yourself and ask your question.
My name is Mary Brooks, and I want to thank you for being with us. It's truly an honor to have you here. I was wondering at what age and under what circumstances you were called to the priesthood.
It was terrible circumstances. So I tell everybody I ran screaming from church when I was in high school. And on my first week on my college campus, I went to Wake Forest University, go Deeks. My first week on the campus, two things happened to me. I met the man that I'm now married to, and I met Father Bob McGee, who was the Episcopal chaplain. And when I met him, he was wearing a clown nose with his clerics and making balloon animals and things. And I thought this was a curious sight. So I went and said something to him, and he introduced himself to me. He said, "I'm Father Bob McGee. I'm the Episcopal chaplain." And I said, "Oh, I used to be an Episcopalian." And he said, "What do you mean you used to be an Episcopalian?" And I said, "Oh, well, I don't do church." And so we chatted for a while, and he made me a sword, which I thought was pretty cool, out of the balloons. And he said to me, "Episcopal Student Fellowship meets at 5 o'clock on Sunday." And I said, I don't do church. And he said, "Well, do you do pizza? We have pizza at 6. I was like, "Free food, I'm there." So I showed up, and what I didn't know was pizza time was formation time, where we actually talked about faith. So I came for the pizza, and I came for the pizza some more, and then I started showing up a little early so I could help clean up, and then I showed up a little earlier and got communion and showed up a little, and the next thing I know, I was reading, I was altar guild, I was doing all this stuff. I was doing church. And so that was my freshman year. And sophomore year, Father Bob said, "Well, don't you think it's time you were confirmed?" And I said, "Well, I don't know that there's room in this Episcopal church for an opinionated, outspoken black woman." And he slid a little piece of paper across the desk to me, and it was a newspaper article about Barbara Harris being consecrated the first Anglican bishop in the world. And he said, maybe. So I was confirmed when I was 19. And my senior year, Father Bob, with all his brilliant ideas, said, "Have you ever thought that you might be called to priesthood?" And I said, "No." "No, sir, I'm not." But he said, "Well, let's think about it. And so I did. I prayed about it, and I said, "Okay, Jesus, I'll make you a deal. I'll go to school, I'll study ethics, and I'll teach ethics and teach people how to be good people." So I started seminary, and my husband calls it a bait and switch because when he met me, I was a pre-med major. So went to seminary, and my second year of seminary, a friend asked me to come preach for MLK Sunday at his church. It was a Methodist church. So I went and I did my sermon, and after the service, after I did my sermon and we had some announcement time, the senior pastor came over to me and he took his stole off and he put it on my shoulders and he said, "I am giving this to you because you know that you are called to this ministry. God is calling you to this. And if the Episcopalians don't want you, the Methodists will take you." So I, at that moment, said, "Okay, fine, Jesus, I will go down this road. They're not going to ordain me, and when they say no, this conversation is over." Well, I was so sure I was not going to be ordained that 2 weeks before my ordination to the diaconate, a friend called me and said, "I'm so excited you're going to be ordained to the diaconate, blah, blah, blah. Have you gotten your clergy shirt?" And I said, "No." And she said, "What do you mean?" I was like, "Do you think they're really going to ordain me?" And she's like, "Your name is on the invitation." So in the picture of the deacons that were ordained that way, this one doesn't have a collar because it arrived 2 days late, but there you go. So that was the beginning of my calling.
Next question. Da-da-da-da. Way back. Come on, Justin.
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 Why did you want to become a bishop in the first place?
Oh. Well, see, there's a thing. I really didn't want, that was not my thing. I actually, so this, see the things God gets you caught up in. So I was asked by a group of clergywomen after I had been ordained for a long time, and there was a priest by the name of Stephanie Schatz in the Diocese of California who was determined that the House of Bishops should look more like the Episcopal Church. There should be more women, more diversity in the house. And so she asked me to be with a group of women to figure out how do we support women in calls to the episcopacy. And I'm like, yes, I'm on it. And then after I got there, I realized that part of my commitment to do this work meant I had to discern in at least 2 bishop searches. So I said, fine. And I kept getting asked, people kept asking me, because when you're ordained when you're 26, you have been a long time priest by the time you're in your 40s. So lots of people would ask me, so can I nominate you to be Bishop of New Jersey? And I would go to my husband, and I was like, so-and-so wants to nominate me in New Jersey. And my husband would look at me and say, I'm not called to New Jersey. I was like, well, okay. So it happened. I was nominated in North Carolina, and I actually dropped out of that race. I discerned it was not for me, even though it was my home state. And then my friend calls and said, Colorado has just released its profile. You should look at it. And I was like, yeah, whatever. And then about a week before the application was due, my friend Jennifer Baskerville-Burrows, Bishop of the Diocese of Indianapolis, called me and said, have you put your name in? I was like, no. She's like, well, I nominated you. Fill out the paperwork. So I go to my husband and I said, honey, Jen wants to nominate me in Colorado. He says, I'll move with you to Colorado. So I said, well, all right. And began that discernment with the folks on the search committee and continue that discernment and fell in love with this place. I was already in love with it because my husband grew up in Kansas City, Missouri, and his family wisely came to Colorado for family reunion and vacation. And the first time he brought me here, I remember landing at DIA, looking at him saying, honey, this looks a lot like Kansas. And he says, wait. And the plane turned, and I got my first view of the Rockies and was sold. And so it was one of the great joys of my life to be called to serve as your bishop here.
As a mom, I'm interested in the challenges that you find being a mother and a wife. And the Bishop of Colorado. That seems like a huge undertaking. Oh, and I'm Helen, by the way.
Hi, Helen. It is, and I always say that life is about partnership, and so I am blessed to have an amazing partner in my life and co-parent who, in the early part of our marriage, when our older kids were young, he was the one that traveled all the time, and I was holding down the fort, and now it's sort of swapped in our later years. Being a mom and a bishop is hilarious for a lot of reasons, but being, I feel bad for clergy kids because they're really stuck in church. And I remember when my oldest was 15, he was like, why are you making me go to church? I don't believe in anything of this. I don't know what you're doing, blah, blah, blah. I was like, well, you're going to church for 2 reasons. One, you have the misfortune of being born into a Christian household. And as a Christian household, we will be faithful in that. And so I'm sorry, but that's the way it is. And 2, I pay your cell phone bill. And so if you'd like to trade out on that, happy to do it. Well, this was a kid who swore to me he was never going to church ever as soon as he moved out of the house. But then he decided to go to a Jesuit university where he had to go to chapel every month. Even during COVID, they had to go to chapel. And I remember my first visit. So my husband moved him out to California in 2020, and I didn't get to go visit until 2021. And I remember my first time I was going to visit, I told him, I'm coming to visit. He's like, Mom, wear your bishop gear. And I said, are you trying to freak the brothers out? He's like, yes. So, you know, it's tough when my life and my vocation and my job are all the same thing. It's beautiful in ways, and it's also hard. And my two 16-year-olds are in that place where we battle about church. And so we brokered a deal, and I've said, you don't have to go to worship if you don't want to, but you do have to go to formation. And so this past summer, there was the mission trip and there was EYE, and I said, you got to go to one. Which one are you going to? And my son Ronan's like, oh, EYE, they're probably going to sing like worship music. I don't want to do that churchy stuff. I'll go serve people. And I'm like, oh, but that's the churchy stuff. And he just rolled his eyes. But my twins are really committed to serving folks, and that does my heart good. I remind them that is what a life in Christ is about. It's about serving folks. So
Great. We got so many pet members right here. Their proximity is closer, so I'm going to get this first.
Hello, my
Hi.
name is Chris Rogero, and I wanted to know what the hardest thing about being a bishop was.
the hardest thing about being a bishop. Honestly, the hardest part of my job is when clergy misbehave.
I didn't think this was going to come up today like this. I'm sorry.
And that's a hard part. I feel like that as a person of faith, I have a couple of roles, and one role is to be the pastor for all of the people, and the other piece is that Episcopal piece. It means to be the overseer. So I'm kind of in charge of clergy and how they minister and all of that, and that's mostly a joy, but the times when it's not, it's really hard. It's really hard because I don't think it's that hard to respect the dignity of every human being. I really don't, especially if you're called into this ministry. We're all human. We're not perfect. We all have flaws, but if it's your job to care for people, I feel like that should be top of your priority list. And it's heartbreaking when other things get in the way. So that's the hard part.
Over here.
Yeah, hi, I'm David. Thanks for being here. I was curious what your perspective is on what the biggest challenges are facing the Episcopal Church right now.
You know, I think like all mainline denominations, we are having to evolve. And so I tell everybody on my vacation, I still go to church, which my kids do not understand. They're like, you're on vacation and you still go to church. But my deal is I don't go to an Episcopal church. So I went to Lutheran and Methodist churches while I was on vacation. And I realized that the mainline denominations are facing the same issues. Big buildings, dwindling congregations, aging congregations, all of that. And so that is a challenge that we're all facing, and I feel blessed that I have such a good relationship with a Lutheran bishop, because we, as denominations that are in full communion with one another, are collaborating all the time on how do we keep this notion of a loving Christianity, and that's what I call it, a loving Christianity, front and center, especially in some of our smaller towns. That's a challenge. I mean, I have to tell you, I come to Christ's Church, and I'm always excited because of the diversity in this room right now. This is a beautiful thing to me. And that gives me hope. And what also gives me hope is how engaged our youth are in this diocese. They are really engaged in asking hard questions. They're not sort of going along to get along. They are really diving in and sort of struggling with this faith, wrestling with it like Jacob did the angel, which I think is all of our task. And that is powerful to me, and I cling to that because as they reminded us at convention that they are the church, right? Not just the future church. They are the church here and now, and that's amazing. I think we as a nation are devolving into some real crazy around faith in terms of Christian nationalism, which is not Christian at all. And whenever we start conflating religious fervor and power, those things tend to go awry for us. And so I think as Episcopalians, we have really good news to share. I mean, somebody asked me, so why are you Episcopalian? And I said, well, I actually feel as though if we lived what we pray and all of those collects we pray all the time, if we actually did those things, we would actually transform the world. That if we did that, it didn't really matter how many of us there are, we would still transform the world. And so I recognize that there are challenges, and people say, oh, the church is dying. I'm like, no, we're just evolving, and we're going to have to learn new behaviors in our evolution. We're going to have to learn that we can't just put our sign out and wait for people to come to us. We're going to have to go to where they are. I love that Father Brian does his office hours at a coffee shop, because that's where people are. And all of us, in whatever order of ministry, whether we're lay, deacon, priest, or bishop, we are going to have to figure out how to share this message, because one thing that I do know is that people are hungry for it. They're really hungry for it.
A few more? Yeah.
Hi, good morning. My name's Jeff. Can you briefly tell us what the Anglican or Episcopal role is in the Middle East right now?
Yes. So the Episcopal Church, which is our official name, the Episcopal Church, we have had a close relationship with the Anglican Church of Jerusalem for a long time. In fact, I don't know if you come to Good Friday service, the offering from Good Friday always goes to the Anglican Church in Jerusalem. So we have been longtime supporters of the church there, and Bishop Hossam, I met him at Lambeth, and he is a delightful and faithful man. And we have been responsible for building, there's a hospital that we built in Gaza that took some damage, unfortunately. So we are continuing our mission, which is to try to protect the innocent and try to care for folks there, regardless of their religious affiliation, regardless of what faith they claim. As the 200,000, almost, it's like 189,000 Christians in that part of the world. We have been supportive of them and their mission and ministry. So we are continuing to be in touch with them. Our presiding bishop and Archbishop Nuam are in conversation, and we're continuing to try and support a just and peace resolution. Just and peaceful, yes.
We know there's probably more questions than we have time for, but we do have an opportunity to continue this downstairs after this, okay? But we do have what will be the last question by Andrew.
What's the best part of being a bishop, and how many churches do you visit in a year?
The best part of being a bishop is getting to visit churches. This is really the best part of my job. This is really the most amazing part of my job, and I love it. And so I have 93 congregations across this beautiful state, 104,000 square miles, and I average about 36 to 38 churches a year, depending on the year, because there are things like I take a vacation and then nobody wants to see me the Sunday after Easter. Every time I've tried to schedule, I'll be with you, and they're like, no, don't come. So it averages about 36 to 38. This past year, between February and June, I put 10,000 miles on the Bishop's Chariot. But I have the best commutes in the Episcopal Church. And I tell all my colleagues that. I'm like, yeah, you can make your diocese bigger, but won't be prettier than mine. So I have the best commutes.
Okay, great. Well, a round of applause for the Q&A.
Thank you.
Great. And thank you, Bishop Kim. Thank you for the canons today, for your support and everything that you help us with. You're always there to lend a helping hand, and we appreciate it very much. Welcome back, Father Brian. Yes.
Yay!
Okay. So we are going to change, and Undercroft is open for refreshments and whatnot. We sort of created it such as it looks like a receiving line down there, but we wanted to make it open and airy, and it's kind of a mingling opportunity moving forward. So, yeah.
There is one table downstairs for the youth. The bishop would like to start out for discussions and have the youth at one of the tables and visit with them real quick as well. So we'll get out of our vestments and meet you all down there. And thank you very much.
Bless you. Thank you.
Let's go in peace. All right.